Hello, Matthew Gates, Integrated Pest Management Specialist, and you're already here. Good job, Aaron, for being here right on time. Hey, Aaron.
Good, exactly noon. I was going to say afternoon, but it's not that. It's exactly noon. Well, now it's 12:01, but good
Yeah,
noon.
good noon to you.
Good
Good
noon to
noon
you,
to you.
sir.
Yes, let me get you situated here. Cool. All right. So what's the topic today?
The topic is this is a controversial one, and we're going to be talking about healthy plants for once, and bugs for the millionth time, and
Yeah.
uh, and so we're going to talk about why do bugs attack healthy plants, and we're going to try and dispel the myth that they don't, or that. And there's not just bugs, there's pathogens, and there's all kinds of things that can attack healthy plants. So we're going to really dive into that. And I look forward to picking your brain about this, because this is definitely a contentious topic for both of us. We've expressed to each other. So I wanted to start by asking you about resistance and immunity. And I was hoping you could kind of brief us on those things and the difference. And yeah, please.
Yeah, definitely. So, and you're right, it is a super contentious topic. And just at the start, on the onset, I just want to say that I'm not saying healthy plants aren't, going to make a difference, because it's absolutely what you should be striving for, right? Definitely. I'm not saying that. But resistance and immunity, right? So, immunity means something very specific when we talk about like pathology, whether it's humans or plants or whatever. And immunity specifically means, in all the cases that I'm familiar with, it means that you can't get whatever that pathology is, right? So like if it's some sort of disease causing pathogen, or it's some sort of well, really everything's a pathogen and pathology for the most part, right? Pathogen thing that creates patho, disease problem thing, really. So immunity is that. Immunity is the incapability of having whatever that is. In a plant scenario, that would be like a virus, for example. They're immune. Maybe this plant's immune to the virus, and it might be immune for very basic reasons, like the virus can't penetrate the plant. So it wouldn't, and like maybe it doesn't have any vectors either. So like there's nothing about the virus wouldn't naturally be able to infect the plant, but maybe it also means that the plant has sort of their immune system also makes them immune, not just like their physical barriers, but like their internal immune system, which your skin is part of your immune system, and so is the outside of a plant. So it's important to like kind of make that point that like a lot of people, even myself, focus on like the sort of what's happening in the immune system innately, but that is also the body of the plant and that sort of a thing. Resistance is not immunity. Resistance is the ability to resist the pathogen, and maybe successfully fight it off. But it's not the same as not being able to be infested or infected in the first place. So that's the
Right. So
big difference.
that's an important distinction, which is a good place to start, right? Is that resistance is kind of what we're saying. You can have a plant that's healthy and resist disease, or you know bugs, or any kind of pathogen, but
Right.
immunity is impossible.
Immunity
Oh,
is
well, wait, sorry,
possible, but
I
but
misspoke.
like, sure, sure. Yeah.
What I mean is immunity by plant health or nutritional environment is impossible. Yes?
As far as I understand it to be the case, you would either already have it. You can, how do I say this? You can induce immunity in some plants through kind of the same ways that we do for humans, like vaccines and that kind of a thing, or some sort of like genetic manipulation, but or hormonal, or you can manipulate the immune system in that way. But usually, typically, it's kind of the thing that in the field you're probably not going to affect. So I think it wouldn't be incorrect to say like, I'm not going to come like me as an IPM specialist. I'm not going to go over and be like, all right, now I'm going to give your plants your vaccines.
Right.
I'm probably not going to induce immunity in the plants. Probably, we don't have that technology.
Right. Well, we could. It's probably not that far away, right? I feel like that's something we could do.
And for the people who love to talk about how important the microbiome is to plant health, that's an incredibly big aspect of it too. And I think that we're still, I mean, it's really in vogue to say something like, the microbiome is everything. It's a lot of things. And it's more so that we don't, and also in vogue to say we don't know everything, but we know a whole lot more than we knew like 1 or 2 decades ago. Um, and with regards to like plant health in particular, the microbiome is super important. Um, but yeah, definitely like inoculations with microbes, I think is going to be a bigger thing in the future. I hope so, anyways.
Sorry about that. I keep getting a call. There's no way to not get calls, right? It's like it vibrates and it like
Yeah.
turns the screen off, and it's like, okay, well, great. Anyway, sorry
It
about that.
actually. Oh no, that's okay. Did you hear what I said, or?
I missed like chunks. Um,
Sure, sure. So I just said that the microbiome is a big part of plant health, and I think that technology that makes utilization of like beneficial endophytes and acknowledges and sort of facilitates their movement. In a lot of research, we see that microbes go from the soil into the plant, and then from the plant sometimes even into like pest organisms, much to their deleterious, ness. And so it's kind of cool to see how that sort of moves upwards into plants, and it's very selective because you have to be if you're a plant, and we'll probably get into this later, but you don't want to let everything in. Not everything that's coming in is going to necessarily benefit you. Some microbes are pathogenic, of course. Some microbes are beneficial, and then they'll switch to being pathogenic. It's just a lifestyle thing. It's not like I think a lot of people are sort of inculcated with this idea that there's like good guys and bad guys, and it's an oversimplification. And sometimes, you have microbes that pretty much you aren't going to expect to ever be pathogenic in most contexts, but some aren't. And if we're talking about natural microbes, a lot of them we don't know most of them. So,
I think a good insect example of that is the earwig. They
Oh
will
yeah.
consume. They generally just consume, organic rotting matter, but in a situation where they lack that food source, they will go after young shoots of like cucumber plants and squash plants and stuff like that. And I've experienced that this year, which is how I've come to learn that. But it's very interesting how they can kind of switch roles, and our classification of what something is arbitrary
Mm-hmm.
at best.
Super, super arbitrary, yeah. And I think that's why I've been drawn to sort of the ecological theories that I have in sort of discussing these kinds of things, because that's what people are doing. They're seeing how these organisms exist, in nature, and we're coming. It's like kind of like with a big one's like carnivory and herbivory and omnivory. Um, a lot of organisms back in the day, might have been classified as purely carnivorous when they really weren't. And like bears, for example, bears eat a lot of meat, but they also scavenge. They also eat berries. They might even eat other things that I can't even think of because I don't know bears. I'm not a bear expert, but that's the kind of thing, right? Where like lifestyle changes, especially with microbes, can be super nuanced. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they're facultative parasites. Sometimes, so that means that they can be not parasites for most of their life, and then when they come across a suitable host, boom, they parasitize that host. And some viruses have they affect some plants, they give them no symptoms. As far as we can tell, the plant's just a carrier, which is great for the organism because if it doesn't have a reservoir population, then everything that it is pathogenic to will die.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to that point too, not to get too much in the weeds, but like, especially with microbes and specifically viruses and fungi, like, it's not like they're consciously thinking like, oh, this is a rose plant specifically,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to eat only roses. Like they'll go onto a plant, especially like when we bring things from like one part of the world to another part of the world, that virus happens to be vectored by some bug, and it just happens to be able to interact with the host physiology. And that's how you get things like the chestnut blight that we were talking about.
Let's talk about that. This is something I was not aware of as a cannabis guy, because this is a tree on the East Coast that basically used to exist and kind of only does in small shoots at this point. Talk to us about that. What's going on with the chestnut blight?
Yeah, so a long time ago, but not too long ago, North America used to have a ton of what we call American chestnut. And essentially, the long and the short of it is that in Asia, there are also chestnuts. So, like the plant group developed, way before well, I don't really know personally, but either the plants like developed during like before Pangea, or at the very least there was some sort of intermix that allowed the same genus to expand out across the world. However that happened, that happened. And there's
Which there
this
now is an
fungus.
ocean between.
Right. Maybe through
Right.
the Bering Strait, like a lot of animals moved from Asia to North America. A lot of plants moved that way. Um, some organisms, they just are able to like go across the ocean through like birds or, all kinds of ways, But regardless of how it happened, it did. And that happened a long time ago. They established all over North America. So this fungus that co-evolved with the Asian population, like the Japanese chestnut specifically, um, the Japanese chestnut developed sort of resistances to this fungus, which I have here as Cryphonetic, Cryphonectria parasitica, right? Yeah, and there are also viruses that infect this fungus that cause hypovirulence, so it causes them to be not as virulent, right? So there's all of this, microbiome interaction that sort of, occurred, that evolved. Didn't evolve in North America, so when people brought Japanese chestnut to America or the Americas, especially specifically North America, like something like several billion trees were just totaled and got infected and died off. And so when people say to me, "Hey Matt, one, the natural way is the superior way, they can't get pests, or two, healthy plants can't get pests," I kind of have to wonder if they've ever heard about this because this story and stories like it happen all the time. And when people talk about a balance, I've even talked about balances, like ecological balance, but it's kind of even hard to really quantify that because all throughout the millions of years of evolution, you'll have organisms become, and this is not a justification for the terrible things humans have done to the environment, right? But it does happen where you have like usurping populations that like change everything up and huge, abiotic effects like meteor strikes and,
Mm-hmm.
so balance is kind of maybe not whatever that balance is, it's not going to be the same over the course of millennia. And so over time, the American chestnut basically is practically gone. And there are some like ways that we've been able to like hybridize the plants and do other sorts of things to make the population more resistant to the fungus. But this kind of stuff happens, and it's because the population of American chestnut didn't have any sort of, it was physiologically similar enough for the pathogen to use as a host, but it didn't have any of those resistances, those traits that the other ones did develop.
So yeah, and that kind of ties right into what we were saying about resistance versus immunity. You know, resistance is a is a buildup of traits, you know, that helps you helps prevent disease or fungal infection. And in the case of the American chestnut, there was no resistance and it got wiped out. Is that to say, right? And so you're kind of like, yeah, I like your comment on the, you know, your skirt around the human nature sort of discussion, the philosophy of introducing these sorts of things. But that's neither here nor there for our discussion, because that, you know, we're no philosophers. We're just here to say this fungus infected perfectly healthy trees.
As far, you know, I mean, as healthy as you can get naturally, right? However we would quantify that, there's a lot of ways you could quantify health. But yeah, I would say that at least some of those plants were probably in their peak health, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it didn't matter at all.
Yep.
And humans can facilitate and exacerbate these sorts of things too. In fact, that is how that happened. So, I mean, in a way, humans were the causal agent of that, but the real causal agent was the pathogen itself. And yeah.
Would that have happened without our hand? Maybe not. But
Maybe.
I mean, entropy would say it would have eventually happened. All things balance out eventually, right? So it would have eventually got some fungus, if not that one. But
well, I mean, if you want to be, I would say this, that like, there's a couple of ways it could go. There's the possibility that the fungus might become more virulent for the Japanese chestnut and wipe everything out in Asia, and then maybe the American chestnut, and maybe wipe itself out. Maybe it takes out all of its hosts. It doesn't have any other alternative hosts, and then it dies or doesn't adapt or whatever. That could have happened. Another thing that could have happened is that, you know, millennia, millions of years in the future, I think it's predicted that the continents might come back again into like another super Pangea sort of thing. Yeah, and so that could happen too. Well, but you know, whether or not the genera are even the same thing after that time is another question entirely, right? And a thing that about the American chestnut that's super important is that they're not all gone, right? Some of them do still exist, and I think it's important to consider that, like when we talk about like what happens in nature, like refugia. I said in the last videos where I've talked about this subject matter, refugia is so important to what's called extirpation, which is when you have a local extinction. And so like if you're a plant and if you're cannabis and you expand all out into Eurasia, and then the plants like gets a virus or a pathogen or something happens, or a natural disaster happens, like glaciation happens, and so the ice was receding, and then it comes back, and it recedes again, and it comes back, and so every time it does that, it destroys huge swaths of plants over time. Mm-hmm. But some of them might live in pockets where it just doesn't get as cold, or the ice doesn't ice over, and that happens too. So it's so critical that sometimes 99% of the plants die, and they all have to build up back from like 1% of the population, which might be disparate. And then those populations, when weather changes and climate changes, sometimes they turn to totally different species because of it. And we have examples of many plants where this is what happened. And so, you know, that's
human evolution bottlenecks to that one woman in Africa. I believe they figured out that I want to say that everybody can be traced back to this one person.
Oh yeah, isn't that they call it like
the mother theory,
like matrilineal Eve or something like that?
Yeah,
and I think there's like four proto-male, like they might not actually be four, but there's like four, I think, male
types.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I don't know it super explicitly.
But it's kind of an interesting parallel there, you know, that that sometimes things have to be rebuilt from 1%.
Well, definitely. Well, I mean, like I was talking with somebody about an anthropologist about like the various homininin, so like the humans, right? I suppose, and like Homo erectus and Homo habilis and Homo sapiens, right? But there are also a bunch of other homos all around Africa, and for a lot of it's thought that there were a lot of different populations that were kind of developing and evolved, and were kind of intermixing even.
I think
Neanderthals are one of
Denisovans is
them.
the new one, isn't it? Denisovians or
Mhm.
Denisovans is the newest
Yeah,
Homo.
yeah, that's one of them too, exactly. And so like there was probably there's definitely interbreeding. There's definitely genetic admixture.
Hmm.
But often what happens is that like um, when there's population replacement, where like one moves into another's territory, they typically displace the other one. And typically, especially the matrilineal line is conserved, but the male line is usually not. So in warfare, I guess that's what happens. But that sort of thing happens in the natural world all the time with plants too. So, or with fungi as well and other pests.
Something really interesting is happening in the comments. Walter and the American one are having a conversation about insect frass.
Mm-hmm.
And are you reading it?
Not really,
Oh,
but
I didn't know if you wanted to touch on this. It's kind of interesting.
I'm fine with touching on it. But
The
is
the
there a thing
claim
to
is
touch on?
that the chitin or the chitin in the frass is going to. Sorry, I'm reading while I'm talking.
Mm-hmm.
Is gonna, let's see. Okay, so the American one asks, can you speak on how some products or procedures invoke the systemic acquired resistance in plants, which may be beneficial but not create true immunity? Correct. That's the question.
Say that one more time.
Okay, it is long-winded. Can you speak on how some products or procedures invoke the systematic acquired resistance in plants, which may be beneficial but not create true immunity? Correct. Question mark.
I'm so sorry. The second word, the subject of your sentence was not
Oh,
legible.
okay, that's all right. Um,
The what of the?
the products or procedures invoke the systemic acquired resistance in
Okay,
plants, which may
okay.
be
Now
beneficial
I
but not
understand.
create immunity.
Yeah. So
And
right.
then
So
chitin was referenced.
right. So chitin's a good one. People love to talk about chitin and chitinase. Right. So saltwater says here. Uh, I think it's plant detection of chitinase, which induces SAR in plants, right? So chitin is the structural component, major structural component of fungal cells, cell walls, and of insect bodies, exoskeletons. Chitin is a polymer. It is very flexible. It's one of the reasons why insects are more adapted to land, and it's a lot lighter than like the sort of calcium carbonate of like crustacean shells and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, anyways, chitin's a big deal. A lot of crustaceans also have chitin as well. But regardless, chitin is broken down by the enzyme chitinase, and chitinase is the thing that a lot of plants develop, or they develop chitinolytic enzymes that aren't chitinases, like citric acid. Citric acid dissolves chitin, for example.
Hmm.
Um, and anyways, so chitinases are enzymes that break down chitin, and obviously that's going to be not great for the health of fungi and pests that are trying to eat the plant, because their whole bodies are made out of that. There's microbes. When I was giving the example of like microbes that'll like move from the soil into a plant, and then from the plant they might be taken up by other insects. I
Mm-hmm.
have a video on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, where I talk about how I think it was a Pseudomonas bacteria. Anyways, I'll look it up and put it in the comments when I put this on IGTV. But what happened was these microbes got into the plant. They were endophytic, so they just lived in the plant. And then when these caterpillars were feeding on the leaves, they got into the system of the insect, the caterpillar, and into their gut. And then they caused this sepsis to happen. They basically punctured holes. The chitinase that they produced punctured holes in its intestinal tract, and it basically had sepsis and died. And that's the kind of thing where microbiome interactions can be super helpful for a plant, and having the microbe in its body is very useful for that purpose. But they can also endogenously create chitinases as well. And so the application of chitin, I think, in a lot of cases is supposed to create this immune response, because they detect the chitin and they create this immune, that they had to detect the chitin to create the immune response to like really have a systemically the SAR response, right? Sort of like
And
this
there are
holy.
other things. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to sidebar. There are other things that activate the SAR. You know,
Oh
bug
yeah,
infestations, leaf thinning, stuff like that can activate it as well, right?
mechanical damage can have a lot of physiological effects. I think I mentioned in last week's Cheap Home Grow podcast that we were talking about the bumblebees, right?
Mm.
There was a research report that came out where bumblebees specifically will penetrate the leaves with their mandibles, and they create these like puncture wounds. And in the plants that they studied, which I think were like tomato and maybe peppers, they induced the production of flowers, bolting. And that's significant because bumblebees feed on pollen. So they do this when there's not a whole lot of pollen around. And it's just amazing to me that they had this reaction. So they're manipulating the plants physiologically too in that way.
They're
Just
farming the plant. I mean,
they are
dude.
farming the plant.
Hold on. I'll go as far as to say they're depping. Those bees are depping plants. They're force flowering.
They are, aren't they?
They're not light depping, but they're doing some kind of.
Wound depping. They're wound depping, I guess.
There you go.
They're.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the same sort of things happen when we cut and we prune plants too. It causes immune responses. It causes hormonal changes in the plant. If you cut the apical meristem, obviously a lot of people know what that does. Causes branching in a lot of plants where they do have apical meristem or the apical
Dominant.
dominance
Mm-hmm.
specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So like that kind of a thing where like even just regular mechanical damage where they don't detect any particular like microbe associated molecular compounds or that kind of a thing, or particles as they're called, MAMPs and PAMPs and that sort of a thing. They're basically if they're biological though, the caterpillar might be chewing on a leaf, and then like proteins and like compounds in saliva will get like into the plant, and that can cause an immune response depending
Mm.
on the plant and its history. Sometimes the response is very specific to certain kinds of insects because of the way that they've developed their detection, and then those insects might have countermeasures that they've developed to like shut it down before it happens. It's very nuanced.
I have an interesting parallel. When you get a splinter from a man-made substance like carbon fiber or like metal, your
Mm-hmm.
body doesn't react to it. You don't swell up. But if you get a splinter from wood or something that humans have been evolving with for a very long time, your body reacts to it in a very specific and targeted way. And it may not be very different from other types of wood, but it's certainly different from man-made synthetic materials.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of interesting.
I like how you put that, because it is true. And of course, in a lot of cases, we create substances specifically because the immune system doesn't recognize them, right? Um, like for implants and that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good point. So like metals and things like that might have a reaction if like the plant has some sort of compound that happens to react with like certain metals,
Right.
maybe,
Aluminum
but
is a
like,
really common one.
right, and nickel, I would imagine, is pretty common too, or
Yep.
nickel alloys.
Yep. Copper. I
Um,
mean, there's certainly a calcium, a lot of metals that interact with plants. But then those, now, I'm not really clear on the difference between heavy metals and metals that plants take up. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but I know that plants aren't supposed to have heavy metals, and I know what those metals are. But I know that there's a number of metals that, or at least elements that can be a metal. Um,
yeah, you like uh, kind of like sodium's a metal, right? God, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm right on the internet. Let me just go
let's internet
Wikipedia
because it's
that
easy.
right now. I'm not a chemist.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's an alkali metal. That's right.
Yeah.
Highly
Okay.
reactive. Highly
Cool.
reactive.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sodium chloride. So you put them together and you get salt, but sodium by itself is a metal, and chlorine by itself is a gas, right? At room
Right.
temperature, anyways.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
But like I could imagine a like sci-fi, fictional world where um certain plants maybe that were growing next to like nuclear reactors, or maybe near like, probably more appropriately, like sewage runoff and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And like maybe like they would develop the ability to sequester heavy metals and other sort of compounds that are super deleterious, but they might not be to the plant as much as they are to whatever eats it. And that could be a really interesting evolutionary move where plants, like salt grass is a good example. There are salt grasses where they live in very saline environments. They're able to do that very well. And I think they rely on some symbionts to do that appropriately, but they sequester all of this salt in their bodies that something that an animal that comes around to eat it, unless it's adapted to eat them, is not going to really do well on
Right.
them. So that kind of stuff happens.
Mm-hmm. Um, I want to turn back to the comments. I feel like it's a lot of fun to. So, Space Dog nailed it. Hormone depping, talking about what the bees are
Yeah,
doing. Yeah.
I saw that comment. I definitely agree with that. It's cool. It's really cool to think about that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
there other comments?
Um, you know, we can continue on. I can look back at my structured my boring structured discussion here. So let's move on to aphids, because for me, aphids were like the ultimate example of doing everything right and still having plants destroyed by aphids.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say everything, I don't want to include. I actually don't mean everything, because my IPM was not dialed in. If I had had a predator bug there, I think they probably wouldn't have swarmed me like that. But my plants were healthy. They were extremely healthy. And this is sort of just one farmer's, look at his plants. But I've been growing for a while, and I know what healthy plants look like. At least I
Mm-hmm.
think I do.
Nah, man, you got pests, so obviously that's not
Yeah.
the case. Like, I hate
Yeah.
that that's what the insinuation ends up being, right? Is that, oh, you had pests, so ergo your plants were obviously ostensibly not healthy, therefore you're a bad grower, quit your job.
Right.
And I
Right.
don't know, that's sort of, not
Let me
really,
speak to all the growers heart to heart. Dude, you're going to have bugs till you die. Don't give up.
yeah, that's how
That
evolution
said,
works.
if you get bugs, you got to do something about it. But I went out into the garden. I had perfectly green, healthy plants, and the plants were still looking good. But I had so many aphids, and they were feasting on the most nitrogenous parts of the plants, and it really led me to some research that showed that aphids. There are a number of aphids that prefer really healthy plants with really a lot of nitrogen coursing through them. And a healthy plant has a lot of nitrogen coursing
Mhm.
through it for a number of functions. So aphids will attack a healthy plant. but I want to hear. I know you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have. So I'll start with the like really like oblique example first. So here's one thing. Aphids account for like something like 50% of plant virus transmission, which is pretty egregious. And sometimes in tests, in laboratory tests, it's unclear always how often this happens in nature, but ostensibly this does happen sometimes, where because aphids don't necessarily always know whether the green structure that they've landed on is a leaf that they can actually feed on or a leaf at all. So they'll probe a plant, and they can transfer a virus or another microbe right then and there. Doesn't have to be a host. They go, ooh, this is not what I want. But you've already transferred the virus through their saliva.
Hmm.
So, like, just because a vector doesn't even normally feed on the plant doesn't mean you can't get the pathogen regardless, because they'll have to probe to make sure anyways. So that
Yeah.
can happen. That's an extreme example, but I wanted to start with it since we're going with absolutes. So here we go.
Yep.
There's one example where that doesn't happen, or where that doesn't really matter if your plant's really a typical host of the vector. But with plants, like some people would argue, perhaps rightly, that like maybe a highly nitrogenous plant isn't healthy because that plant, maybe if it has too much nitrogen, then obviously that's going to help the pest in the same way that maybe somebody who has too much sugar in their blood is going to be diabetic,
Mm-hmm.
or might feed certain pathogens or things in their system, maybe, that kind of a thing. But I would argue that, like, I think that's a totally okay interpretation, but like nitrogen's usually a big limiting factor with plants, so it makes sense that they would try to take it up as much as possible when it's available, right? And
Also, highly mobile in the plant, moves around a
super,
lot. Yeah, easy for them to just receive once they've, inserted their feeding device into the plant tissue. The plant just sort of pumps it into their body, and the
through passive pressure.
passive pressure, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're like little taps. I like to call them little taps. And so they just put their stylet in there, and it's actually a very precise precision mouth part. And without going super in depth, basically, it can be so precise it can get into the sieve elements, and it can like suction out the cell contents of like individual cells, which is an adaptation to the immune system, because if you are like if you're very sloppy, let's say, and you just do make a lot of collateral damage structurally, you're gonna elicit the immune response in a much more general and much more immediate way than if you just get each cell, that kind of a thing. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes sense. And now, I mean, you said you wanted to not go into too much detail about it, but now I really want to know, how does this, this precise tool work so well? Does it bend, or does
Oh
it?
yeah. So aphid mouth parts, there's 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 there are mandibles that are they're like needles almost. They're like two halves of like a very like long structure, and they open up kind of. And then
Mhm.
there's like another sort of like tongue-like organ, and I forget if that's the maxillae or not, or any of those sort of technical terms. But basically, there's a more flexible apparatus that goes in to the sieve elements of the phloem channels in the plant that move the sugar and other sorts of things like that. And plants have adaptations against this. They can block the sieve elements with structures that I don't remember the names of, but it is in my aphid video, my
I
overview of
remember. Yeah.
aphids.
Does
Yeah,
it start with a C? I feel like it starts with a C.
Kalos plugs or something like that,
That's
I
it.
want to
Yep.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
it? Okay, cool. I remembered.
Yeah.
Um, so like there are plug structures that they can make, but of course, like it's like scar tissue. You don't really want it. It might be invisible to you
But it
outside.
blocks shit up.
It blocks stuff up,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And and there are like effector proteins that both sides make that like either facilitate or suppress the immune response and that sort of thing. Maybe produce compounds the aphid doesn't like. Um,
Do
some
those compounds malaffect the plant itself, or usually not? The compounds that
I
the
mean,
plant is producing to discourage the aphid.
I mean, probably
That's
not
a
more
very
than the damage is, right? Because if an immune response, if you dump everything into an immune response, you might not be doing other things in the body. So you
mm,
could make the argument that like if they're fighting something off, that's not great, right?
sure. That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
But
had a
I would
doctor.
say not.
I've had a doctor explain to me that's why you shouldn't get tattoos, because when you, although I'm covered in tattoos, but when you get tattoos, your body tries to fight. It always is sending white blood cells at your epidermis to pull that ink out. So it's all, your immune system is always like working in overdrive once you've tattooed yourself.
Oh, geez. I never thought about it like that, but that makes a certain sort of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, that your immune system is not working overtime, but it's certainly chipping away at it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to consider. Um, but like for
I know
example,
it's
whiteflies have I was reading a research report where they were saying that some whiteflies, silverleaf whiteflies in particular, when they feed on the plant, they can cause an immune response that affects other herbivores but not them. Sometimes the immune response also affects them, but they can also elicit immune responses that more generally affect like two-spotted spider mites, I think were the pests that they were looking at. And so it's like because
well,
they're
yeah,
competing for
sure.
the same food resource. So this is intra or inter-guild predation, or not predation but competition. um
That's what's happening in my garden right now. Remember the question I asked you this morning about the praying mantis eating my beneficials?
yes.
So I think was it? I think Salt Walter brought it to my attention this morning. Like, and it made me think. I think the mantis is. I have so many. They showed up in swaths there. I mean, there's like hundreds of little baby mantis out there, and I think, or
Hmm.
manti. The manti, when you're talking about multiple.
Mantises or mantids,
Man,
I guess technically that's like one particular group, but whatever, I know what you mean.
you know what I'm saying. The mantises are running around like crazy this morning, and it really got me thinking. I think they're after. I think I have cucumaris sachets all over the
Hmm.
plants, and I think the cucumaris are starting to come out, and I've seen aureus all over the place, and I'm like, dude, I think these guys are just going after my beneficials, which is all well and good, right? A healthy ecology, at least predators are there, but they're eating my money.
Right, definitely. And like, I mean, I've seen it before where mantids, where a small little nymph mantis was feeding on, it was like Cucumaris, I think it
Yeah.
was, or Swirsky, one of the
Or
two.
I have Swirsky in there too. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were definitely there. I definitely saw them eating, and I think I posted on Instagram even. This was like a year or two ago, year and a half, 2.5.
It's
But
ringing a bell now. Yeah.
yeah, and it's really, it's kind of neat to consider, but like they're probably not going to make a huge dent in the population. Maybe of other natural predators that are like less copious in your area, but that's what happens, I guess. I think, and just for anyone who's curious, I don't think mantises are a particularly great beneficial,
Mm-hmm.
at least in cannabis. But it depends on where you're at. I would just say that most of the big pests are really small, and so mantises just don't go after them.
That's right.
But like,
I've seen mantis in my garden, literally living on russet mites,
hmm,
not eating them, just right around them, walking on them, hanging upside
oh
down
right,
next to
yeah,
them. Like, not interested in this.
yeah. No, they're just too small. They're like
Yeah.
200 micrometers or whatever. They're very
Yeah.
very tiny.
And you can
Um,
only see them because your plant is like, looks like it's rusted
yeah,
out. It's like brown.
right.
And
Most most russet mites aren't pests. People are always surprised when I say this, but most russet mites are super inconspicuous. I think they call them, I think the technical term is like vagrant or something. Like basically, they live on the plant. They're kind of like the sort of mites that live in your eyebrows or whatever, the
Yep.
demodex on your face.
Yeah.
They don't really, unless you have an immune response to them, which some people do more than others. But like, yeah, like dust mites, some people have an allergy. Don't
I
you
have an
said you
allergy to
did,
dust
right?
mites.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't, but I might in the future as my immune system changes, as I get more exposed to them or less exposed to them or
That's it.
something like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that could change for me in the future. You were going to actually about regarding the aphids. You brought up a really cool point that I want to touch on, which is that when plants wilt, because we were just talking about aphids and a lot of other hemiptera, anything that has a sucking mouth part, and they usually use positive pressure from the plant that gets into their body and it shunts it, and they produce the honeydew, and that's because they can't take it all at once, and they even have symbionts, bacteria that process the food for them, the sugars and the amino acids. If they didn't have that, they'd be dead. They couldn't feed on plants without these microbes. They were so critical for them to adapt to herbivory and all of the ways that they've done that and the coevolution with all the different plants. But importantly, they require that like biomechanical physics of turgor pressure. If you don't have that, what happens?
Well, the plant goes flaccid and wilts.
Right. And that's going to be difficult for the plant parasite that needs to feed on the phloem. If the
Right.
phloem pressure isn't there, there's no tap, so it can't tap the plant as
Yeah.
easily.
That's just sort of like, a logic stream. These are things we have to think outside the box on right now. You sort of have to hypothesize about how things can happen and then see if you can observe it. And that's basic science, right?
Hmm.
So, so the idea being that plants possess this pressure, this internal pressure that helps things like aphids feed by forcing the fluid into the body of the pest. But lacking that pressure, aphids may be less inclined to feed on that plant because there's less fluid over time to consume.
Not only could it be less fluid over time, but it could also be that it's just difficult for them to even establish a connection in the first place. A wilting plant, might be very difficult for a particular aphid to sort of connect with. If the colony was already established in the plant, I see the American one was asking, so just let the plant wilt until the
No,
aphids
no, no,
go
no.
away? Well, maybe, probably not though. You probably
No,
shouldn't
no,
do
no,
that.
no. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying though, as this is just a sort of food for thought example as to how aphids can sometimes prioritize healthier in our mind, healthier plants
Hmm.
over and healthy turgidity being a measurement of health, right? I know it was a joke, American one, but we might as well
Yeah,
ride
that's
this
why we're
train.
all laughing.
Yeah, yeah.
I
But
hope
the
you're
but that
laughing.
but turgidity being a measurement of plant health in this scenario, aphids might prefer that. So this is just an example
Hmm.
as to how aphids would go after healthy or turgid plants.
Exactly. I mean, it's literally like I would say most people wouldn't disagree that a plant that is wilting is having kind of an immune response.
Right.
Maybe not to like a biotic thing, but it's still a reaction to the environment. Pests are part of the environment, and the abiotic effects of the environment are also part of the environment, like temperature, humidity, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, that's the thing is that like plants that are going through that issue. Another thing is hypersensitive response, which is kind of in the same vein. So hypersensitive response is when, like, if a pathogen gets into a plant. I was talking about how aphids are kind of precise with their mouth parts, and one of the benefits that it kind of helps suppress the immune response, plus their saliva, plus a bunch of other things in tandem. So if a pathogen infects a leaf, let's say, um, and the plant has a very precise, maybe it's co-evolved with this pathogen quite a bit, it might have a response where like a lot of the cells will immediately like detect it and then like lyse themselves, autolysis. And so they'll just lyse and die. They'll just kill
Mm-hmm.
themselves before they become zombies, right? That are or infected or whatever.
Or
Um,
vectors for further spread.
because that's what they'll do, right? If it's a virus, then it infects the cell and reproduces and gets other cells to reproduce more of the virus, usually. Something like this. If it's a like powdery mildew or something or some sort of fungal parasite, it might not do quite like this, but it will sort of infest various cells and that sort of a thing. And a hypersensitive response is when maybe the plant just takes off the leaf by
Yeah.
itself. Maybe it just abscesses the leaf, and that's the immune response, and it just keeps it from getting to the like kind of like detaching a limb, right? And you know, different plants have various like sensitivities to certain pathogens, right?
You're getting close to something that I have a really big question about, a burning question
Okay.
about. This question might not be that big, but can plants get allergies? Or is this just something that people have sort of evolved as this domestication and, you know, lack of Darwinianism has happened to us?
Well, I would say that an allergy is like is not an allergy sort of an immune response in and of itself, kind of
Yeah.
like yeah, so like I would say that you could call like a phytotoxic effect kind of like an allergic reaction, sort of.
Okay. Okay. So like,
Saliva, well, there's saliva of some or well, yes. So like the saliva of aphids and like mites and certain organisms can cause hormonal changes or changes in the immune response that you could kind of consider like an allergic reaction. Yeah,
especially
it's
because
just
certain
very
plants
different.
respond more seriously than others.
And humans, and so like with humans, we have the so plants and humans have the innate immune system, but humans have the adaptive immune system that we have. And I think that plays a big role in allergies and other sorts of reactions as well, like the
Good
B and
point.
T cells and everything we make. I was reading a really interesting conversation online between a couple of pathologists, and I guess they were talking about how um, in the human body we produce like cells that are basically there's a highly variable like gene cluster. Essentially they're just constantly making various mutations of all the different combinations that could fit into these like protein sort of receptors.
Hmm.
And so what's great about it is because it means that almost like mathematically, statistically speaking, you'll have the ability to react to just about anything except for critically things that would also fit to your own body. So if it does, that's an autoimmune response. But if it doesn't, then if like a virus comes in or a pathogen comes in that makes those proteins or they like shed certain like proteins that like break down in your system and then they can connect with that, then there's almost a guarantee that at some point they're going to detect it,
Hmm.
you know, and it's almost a statistical inevitability, which is amazing to me. But
Yeah.
plants don't really have white blood cells and that sort of thing.
Right.
They
It's a
have they
slower.
have a mercenary system. They let other things come in and do that for them.
Yeah, that is wild, man. You know, and as much as we try to make, or as much as I try to make parallels between um, human evolution and bug stuff, um, I kind of get shut down sometimes. And somebody made a really cool, and I'll even step back and say a really humbling comment on my post about my parallel of hunting deer and how
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, hunting healthy deer doesn't really compare to the natural way of things looking for the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak. And I think most creatures probably go after, I'd say most, in terms of their history, most creatures go after lowest hanging fruit, the easiest food to get to, scavengers and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But there's a thing that happens with like domestication and specialization through evolution, where you're able to eat certain things, and then you have to eat those things. And I think
Yeah.
we can't consume rotting meat because we stopped consuming rotting meat while we were evolving.
Hmm.
I know we're still evolving and all that, but I mean, this is just sort of a comment in terms of like how hard it is to make these sorts of parallels, or sometimes hard to understand even how bugs can develop this sort of this system where there's a pathogen or a bug for every single situation.
Almost, right? It seems like, and you know, it's a very predator human perspective to say, like, to give the analogy that you gave, because like some
Yeah.
carnivores kill fresh meat, and some carnivores do that and also scavenge, and like we said about lifestyles, very different, you know, and they can change very greatly. We're probably coming up on like the 3 minute mark, if my
Yep.
if my timing is right. But I did want to say that it's true though, like um, as an analogy, it's kind of, I mean, I guess you can kind of make the point that like plants that, like for us when we're choosing food to eat, we don't want to eat disease stuff too. So like plenty of herbivores, you know, avoid plants that, like whether they're pests like insects or mammals or whatever, they might totally avoid a diseased plant because because that plant well, the nutrients are kind of already being used by something else. Or a lot of times it's because something is going to have an intraguild interaction with us, like molded, like ergot on wheat, you know, that, or like the pathogen that
That's
kills horses in the
that's a
grass.
good interaction.
Yeah. It's good. It's, you know, it's not great for us. It'll kill
No,
us. Like we recognize that that plant
but
is moldy.
if you can pull the lysergic diethamine out of it, then that's great, right?
That's true, right? I mean, for some people, right? And you know, it's kind of like that where organisms, you know, a certain level of weakness is tolerable and even beneficial, but other
Yep.
sorts of susceptibilities are not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah, that's right. That's a more
But yeah,
succinct way to say it. Yeah.
sure. But I think that like, you know, all analogies are gonna break down in some way, you know, at
Yeah.
some point when you look at it. So it's kind of, it's easy to like create a gotcha question or gotcha
Yeah.
answer response. But I think that I think it's good to criticize analogies though, for that
Yeah.
reason.
It's good to criticize and now it's good to create them, to create parallels, and it's good to get the understanding enough to know how to break them back down.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
do you want to do more time? What's your schedule looking like? Or do you
I can keep going. We can do a second one if you want.
it's totally up to you. I think, I didn't prepare a whole bunch of stuff on this, but we definitely like I hope that we smashed it out of the park. I hope people understand that like your healthy plants can get bugs. Please do
Mhm.
please have a controlled IPM.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think that those are pretty good examples, like at least in nature.
You
Um,
want to do 15 minutes and then just see if anybody has any questions and kind of crystallize some topics?
well, we're about to be done here, so we'd have to do another live.
Do you want to do that or do you want to call it?
Yeah, let's do it. So
Okay.
anyone who's got questions or whatever, go in the next live. This will be an IGTV.
I'll see you in 2 minutes.
All right, see ya. Live again, so hopefully Aaron has already become aware of that, and we'll talk more about why healthy plants can get pests. And this is mostly for anyone who has questions or something like that. So if you have questions about this subject, please. Hey.
Beam me up. I am here. Okay.
Yeah, so just in case people are coming in now, um, the topic that we were just talking about, which is going to be on IGTV, is why do healthy plants become infested? And we gave a bunch of reasons for that, and this is for people who have questions. So.
Okay, Sesh God says, do you guys go over spider mites IPM already, or did you guys? We didn't really touch on spider mites too much.
But
I mean,
it's a good example. I'm happy to give a answer to this. So, especially the two-spot spider mite, Tetranicus certicae, or C, really, it's it's like good 40% of its genome is for dealing with compounds and other sorts of things that it will encounter in plants that will be toxic to itself. So a lot of its body, a lot of its genes are made to process those compounds and detoxify them. And those are a lot of them are defense compounds made by plants. And the two-spot spider mite is super, super prodigious. It's got like 1,200 recorded documented species that are host plants. It's got genes that actually are from bacteria originally that help it actually detoxify compounds and that sort of a thing. So even if you had a very healthy plant with a very competent immune system, these mites are also very competent at sort of breaking down that immune system. And just like aphids, they also can sort of be very precise in how they take up cell contents so that they really suppress the immune response in a localized fashion. Yeah.
And yeah, really good description. That's super, the more you understand how bugs feed on your plants, the more you can understand different ways that you can treat them. And like Matt and I always talk about, this is bleeding edge stuff. And like, there isn't a handbook out there on how to treat a lot of these cannabis pests. I mean, there's Matt, you can hire him and he'll come.
And I have a book that I sell for people who want to know, but
I
I
didn't
don't
know that.
advertise it. I do.
Oh my gosh.
I
Why haven't I
probably should
bought it?
advertise it more. I don't know.
You need to advertise it more. I didn't even know that. And I talk to you like all the time.
That's true. Yeah, maybe I should be a little bit more. I just don't want to come across. I have that problem with marketing. I should just swallow it and just be like, hey, here's my thing.
Just hire somebody if you can. I mean, like, there's a lot of companies that'll do this stuff for you.
That's true, right? But
what's the book called?
So the treatise is what I call it. It's a treatise because I'm really, really pretentious. And it's basically cannabis pests of what would I title it? I actually don't even remember my own pretentious title.
Well, it makes you seem pretty humble if you don't remember your own damn title.
I know, right? Maybe it's a defense mechanism.
It's your pretentious defense mechanism.
Basically, it's what do I call it? It's right here. Yeah, cannabis pests and their management. Okay. Very simple. Very, very simple.
Gotta put it in my cart.
And I have versions of it. I'm on version 2 right now, and I work on it every year because new things come about when I talk with people, and I think it's important that people have this effect, or that they have this resource. So, and I make a lot of that information free to people on my YouTube channel too.
Dude, so can you send me a link to the book and I'll share it with people, or if you want to share a link, because I think people want to buy this freaking book if they can.
I don't have like, that's another reason why I don't talk about it too much. It's person to person is the way that I'm like distributing it currently.
That's all right. Self-publishing in the most realist form, man. So if anybody wants it, what are you charging for it? Have you figured out a price?
Yeah, it's $50.
Cool.
Because it's about 70 pages of like information. A lot of the pest I put the reference in there too for people who want to have that so they can look into it. They know that I'm not just talking out of my butt about all of these things. That it's really important to me that people know that what I talk about is like at least in some way empirically supported. It's one reason why I don't have a russet mite video out about the hemp russet mite, because I could talk about my experiences, and I should probably do that, but I want to have all of my pest primer videos have research attached to them so that people can look into what I was talking about. And
I love that,
there's
man.
just there's just not research regarding it right now, so I don't feel good, you know,
The YouTube, you remember
talking
the
too
YouTube comments,
absolutely about it.
the YouTube comments last week where that guy was kind of pressing you about studies that he had no proof for, and it's like,
Oh
dude,
yeah.
show
Yeah,
me
it
the
was
proof.
well, and it was about this bricks level thing with
Yeah, the
regards to the
bricks.
health of plants, right? Yeah, and how like they were saying all pests, but I was willing to concede that maybe it's some pests, but which ones? And do you have like do you have something that tells me exactly how? Because I'm genuinely interested, but I think this is a case where even the researcher that they cited, who has some really great, sideburns. I don't remember his name.
Oh God, this guy, dude. Oh
Nate,
no,
I don't remember his name, but
I can't remember his name
he's
either.
I don't think he's a bad guy or anything, but I think that people often, even with like people like Paul Stamets, they'll take something he says and then they'll like super extrapolate it, and he didn't intend that. That happens to scientists all
Right,
the time.
but I think also he. God, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but there's a lot of dollar signs in his eyes, I think, and as much as valuable as his information is, I think there's a lot of you know pull for an income on sort of the specialized course. He's developed a lot of stuff. I don't even want to talk about him too much, but yeah, that is an
Sure, I don't
interesting.
I don't know him personally
Me
or
neither.
anything like that, but like you should always question any authority, including myself, which is why I do the research reports, which is why I include that because I don't think it's right to just say something and just be like, take my word for it, unless you have to. Like, there's no other option. You can't access the research. You're in a pickle. I get it. Hopefully, people trust me, but I want people to be able to verify what I say. Because maybe I
Yeah,
said it wrong. Maybe I cited a research report and I said the opposite on accident, you know, like right
or maybe
here.
I said it on purpose, and I'm looking for somebody to figure. No.
Or that happens as well.
Okay.
Um, let's
Um,
answer questions.
oh,
What do
spider
you
mite
consider?
treatments. In terms of treatments, um,
Well, I mean, we're talking about the subject matter from the last video, right?
yeah,
I mean,
but
I don't
somebody
want to.
said, "Did you cover IPM treatments?" And I just wanted to throw there Amblysius. Uh, the whole family of Amblysius works really well. What's the one? Is it Phallacis? Phallacis?
Phallacis, yeah.
Phallacis. They're really good with two-spotted spider mites, I've heard.
Okay, yeah, and Californicus as well. But Phytocilius persimilis is the kind of
Yeah.
the king spider mite killer, I would say, in my
Okay.
opinion. The Cedary Ink asks your IPMs for aphids. Like super broadly, it's hard to say, but basically, there's usually parasitoid wasps you can use, although we've talked about how
We did
that
a
can be a
whole
little bit
we did a whole video.
difficult.
Check dude, I think that one's actually on my Instagram. Go to my Instagram
Yeah,
TV. We did a whole aphid chat, dude, top to bottom.
we did. I have a video on my YouTube channel that's an overview on aphids, and it does go over, it breaks down their physiology, how they evolved, but also later on, which you could just skip to if you want, biocontrol agents and that kind of a thing, flies and wasps and lady beetles and all these sort of organisms. So please check it out. Essentially, you should try to, in all cases with aphids, try to break down their life cycle. It's super rapid, so if you can knock down their population and then utilize a biocontrol agent and stabilize that agent or find some way to like keep them in your area, which maybe it's outdoor, maybe it's indoor, it's hard to say, it's hard to give advice without knowing that context. But that's one way you can, that's like kind of my generalized advice for aphids is that they reproduce really fast and they move really quickly as a population, so you have to fight that. And usually a
It,
knockdown spray of some like biopesticide or whatever is available where you live, and then use a biocontrol agent. I also have an international reach, so I don't really know if you're American or Canadian
yeah,
or
Totally. In
or
my
from South
area, I've
Africa,
had really
or
good luck. In my area, Northern California, I've had really good luck with starting with the knockdown sprays during veg, and hopefully while still in veg, work into biological controls such as green lacewing, Aphidius urvi, which I think you kind of brushed over, that the parasitic wasps are killer, the Colemanni. And then in my area, Aureus insidiosus, the minute pirate bugs, are indigenous, and they are savages. They go
even
crazy.
on aphids, huh?
Yep. And then Aphidoletes aphidomyza, I've also been recommended. I've used it once, but I didn't see a lot of good outcome from it. But it's highly recommended.
Hoverflies too. I see it. It's usually the natural populations are a few weeks behind, in my experience. I mean, but everyone's different. And if you live really close, or you basically live inside of like the wilds wherever you are, then this might be a lot quicker of a thing. But hoverfly larvae are very, very common aphid predators, and they're voracious. And sometimes you'll see the hoverflies. They look like little wasps sometimes, but they can like hover. That's why
Mm-hmm.
they're called hoverflies or flower flies, because they like the flowers. And on my YouTube channel, I have a ton of observational videos where you can see what they look like, so you can identify them in the field. So,
Yeah,
and
don't
I do
spray
talk about.
with your wasp spray. They're good.
Yeah, they're good. They might look like wasps, but they're not. It's just so that
Yeah.
they don't get eaten.
Yeah.
Smiley's Garden asks, what do you consider a healthy plant? Is there a way to measure it? So that's a good question. That's what I always ask people when they say that their plants are healthy. Well, what do you mean? A lot of people use a Brix meter, but that's just dissolved sugars in phloem sap. That's not necessarily comprehensive, but it does give you an idea of like what the plant's photosynthesizing and what it's storing and what's producing as food for itself, which is, a pretty good proxy, I think,
Mhm.
for
I think
like one of the most physiologically important processes in the plant.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
And that said, I think it's like you're getting at. It's one sort of standpost that you use to bolster health. Like there's a lot of different facets to, is a plant healthy, you know? Um,
Definitely.
and as
Nutrients
we
are another
develop
important
technology,
aspect here.
we're learning about more and more about how to test for plant health. Dude, if you want to know somebody that's doing a lot of good work in terms of plant health, Brandon
Always.
Russ Brandon is doing, like, he's got all the kits from that company. I can't remember
That's
the name.
right. That's right.
Dude, he's killing it.
And you can
I
see
keep,
him today. And you can see him today at the Cheap Homegrown podcast on YouTube. I will be there,
I will
or
be
be
there.
nowhere.
I will be there.
That's what my
Looking
old
forward to
sergeant
it.
did.
Yeah, we'll ask him. Well, that'll be something we can talk about. We'll ask Brandon how that's all going, because I am curious. But there's a lot of things you can judge a healthy plant by. We were talking about earlier, turgidity. So if a plant is praying, when you come out in the morning and you see your plants doing this, that's a good
Mm-hmm.
sign of plant health. And if you don't have a Brix meter and you don't want to slice open your plant and collect plant sap and look at it through a slide, a lot of us are, old school farmers just look at a plant, and we use different methods to tell if a plant is healthy by its wilt or its turgidity, and then also like its color, its trichome production if it's in flower, and its development, branchiation, branching, whatever. The process of branching, to branch, apical
Yeah,
dominance, all those things
sure.
are a measurement of health.
I would say, yeah, and I would say that like things like hollow genome theory and phylosymbiosis theory, which you could go check those out online. But basically, we're learning more and more that like most organisms are really meta-organisms. They're composite organisms, like us and our microbiome. Most people know that there are tons of microbes in our gut, and the volume of microbes can be pretty high, and sometimes even outnumber, in some estimates, although I'm not sure how valid they are, they might even outnumber a lot of our cells and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing, which are endogenous to our own genome. Kind of a neat thing, right? So, you might include the microbiome in that meta-organism health sort of
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
sphere.
Yeah,
Which
I
I'm sure
consider it
you,
one of the most diverse microbiomes. I would presume with, was it like 380 trillion cells and then 375 trillion foreign cells.
I mean,
Some
and that some of those are pathogen load too, so they're not all great, but that's
right.
true. And like, and there's interesting studies that talk about how people who have certain diets will facilitate a certain microbiome in humans. Obviously, this is true for many things. And as far as talking about pests, it's kind of understood nowadays that like insects, very many insects moved from detrivory, like the ancient ones, to herbivory and fungivory because they were feeding on decaying stuff and they got microbes that allowed them to feed on plant matter. So for a time, there were not herbivores, right?
Mm-hmm.
Herbivory had to develop, and that's one of the ways it was able to develop. And so insects develop these symbioses, and other organisms too, with microbes that facilitate that, either because they help break down the structural compounds of the plant, or whatever. Like termites, they don't really eat the wood. They consume the wood, and then the microbes break down the wood in their gut, like that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty common way that happens. So hopefully that answered the question.
I think
Another question is, how do you go about making sure you're completely clean before going into a sealed room? You want to take that?
my experience is there's a whole lot of technology in that regard. There's sticky trap flooring for your shoes. Of
This
course,
is
like
Medicine Maine. I just want to mention this is Medicine Maine. We see
okay,
you.
we see
Anyways.
you, we see you. Um, but but yeah, there's a lot of measures that can be taken, and of course, how sealed is the room is the starting question, and then that determines how clean you need to be. A lot of living soil facilities um, don't don't clean room. So in my experience, I'm a living soil guy. I don't I don't deal in clean rooms, but I've seen them, and it's really something else, man. These are like $50 million build outs for for like 10,000 square feet.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've been in facilities where they attempt to do that sort of a thing, and I think it's not terrible. I think that it's not something I have enough experience to talk about super
You know,
adroitly.
I have an account that this guy should follow. I forgot who asked, but okay, Clean Bud with a
Clean
K.
Bud. I've worked with Clean Bud with a K. Yes, he talks about a lot of cool stuff. I highly recommend and encourage that suggestion. Good on
If you're
you.
into clean room stuff, that guy comes from clean rooms and is
Yeah.
now in the cannabis industry. So
Yes, yes, I definitely agree with that. There's also another Instagram account called Wine County, Wine Country Engineer. I forget which, but he talks
not
about a lot
familiar.
of cool stuff sometimes about in that regard. I think he also talks about HVAC systems and sort of HVAC adjacent systems as well, and air filtration and filters, and I think that's super important. Clean Bud does too, by the
Hmm.
way, as well.
But it's a
So
highly specialized portion of a clean room as an HVAC system. It has to be so dialed in, especially multi-level grows with
yeah,
multiple floors.
definitely. It's I mean, I can't say very much about it, but I am impressed with such systems, and they do have their place. But the American one asks, I had a multi-strain sun-grown crop, and spider mites were only on one strain almost exclusively. Why? What do spider mites like about that strain specifically, if known? I don't know personally, but
In my, I mean, spider mites go after terpenes. They use their olfactory system and their visual system to determine a host. Am I accurate?
I mean, I'm sure that plays a part. A lot of the times, though, they distribute passively on the wind.
Hmm.
So how much control they have over that is sort of, kind of up for debate. But
Interesting.
and spider mite eyes. I actually know because I have a video about it where I talk about some physiological traits of spider mites, and they have a pretty primitive eye
Right.
system. A lot of mites do, but they
That's a
can
nice
see.
way to say their eyes suck.
Well, it does. It's good for what they want.
Yeah.
Fun fact: arachnids back in the day used to have better eyesight, but they evolved to have worse eyesight as they kind of are on the ground a lot and don't need it, I guess. But regardless, they do respond to the color green, the color red, and sort of like violet near ultraviolet. I think the green light. God, I don't want to say this incorrectly. You can check out the video on my channel, but basically, I think the the green light was attractive to them, so it made them positively go to the green light, which makes sense. And I think the red light was not attractive or neutral. One of them was repellent, one of them was attractive, and one of them kind of didn't do either of those things.
I
If I
think the
remember,
green is attract is the attractant.
it might not be. It might have been the red, but I
Oh,
just don't remember. I
that's
don't
I
know
know
why. For sure.
humans get hungry when they see red and yellow.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Um, let's see here.
Thanks, McDonald's, taking advantage
Yeah,
of
thanks to Donald.
our
Ketchup
weak
and mustard. No.
evolutionary history. And ketchup and mustard.
I was just talking about, I just made a video about this parasitic wasp, and I talked about bee violet or bee purple, which is like this sort of yellow ultraviolet mix that bees and other Hymenoptera are very sensitive to because floral guides on the petals of flowers that we can't always see. Typically, we can't see because we don't see ultraviolet. Um, but they might have other pigmentation, which is basically where they are. But they're attracted to those
Yeah.
colors, and it allows them to find nectar and pollen and oils and resins, and that's what a lot of solitary bees use the scents from flowers to make pheromones. And if they
Mhm.
didn't have the access, then they couldn't do that and attract a mate. So
In other words, like the entire chemical structure of those pheromones that those bees produce is foreign to them.
yeah, well, it's more so that like they require, it's kind of like nutrition, right? They require the scent. Well, it depends. So some of them, I wish I had my bee ecologist friend with me to talk about this more elaborately, but basically they either use the scents, like they coat them on their bodies and use them in that way, or they in some way process them and like mix it with themselves either by eating it or, if I remember correctly, some other process like that. And so, but like the scents are important in that way.
Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense. So he kind of asked a crystallized question of, so are the spider mites like my favorite plants, it seems, or my favorite plants don't have a strong resistance? And I would say both.
yeah, potentially. It's just hard to say, really. I think that they just kind of were on one because they happened to get onto that one and colonize it. And if you
And they
would have
liked it,
let
so they
that
stuck
plant
around.
get super, if that plant would have get super colonized, I'm sure, or like if you touch the plants together, I'm sure eventually they would have
Sure.
gone after it. At least typically. Maybe there is something special about your particular plant, but hard to know.
I would say
Um,
it probably has more to do with a preference than a deterrence, because I've seen spider mites on every strain you can possibly imagine, and and then also I've seen them be selective. So it's like there's so many factors, so many factors. Maybe it's too hot on one side of your garden, too cold on one side of your garden for them. But the genetics are really good. They want that plant, but it's too cold over there or something. There's so many factors.
Lone Wolf Organics asks, how long do thrips live for on average? Well, the entire order of Thysanoptera is kind of variable, but I'll talk about one of the biggest pests, which is probably what you think of, even if you don't know it, and that's the western flower thrips, Frankliniella occidentalis. There are over 5,500, I think 6,000 now is the estimate that I've seen in some research, but there's over 5,000 species of thrips, but the vast majority of them, like russet mites, aren't actually a huge problem for their plant host, or at the very least, they don't kill their plant host. They might gall up or gnarl the leaves or whatever, but the plants can still survive.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they vector a virus, then it's a little bit different. But like Western flower thrips can. And I have I have a pest primer video on it. So that's a series that I do where where I specifically talk about their physiology and their interaction in agricultural crops and research about them, sort of general knowledge stuff, including usually a treatment, but not always. And anyways, because sometimes it doesn't exist. But Western flower thrips are really interesting. If they can survive at pretty low temperatures, but they start to have a lot of problems around, I want to say it was like below 10 degrees Celsius. You start to have some big issues, or
Mm-hmm.
12 was it? And that's on one low, or one on one end, and then higher up around like 30 degrees Celsius. Like a lot of insects, you start to see problems with molting and that sort of a thing. I think 30, actually, it might have been 32 degrees for Western flower thrips, and 30 or 28 was like a sweet spot where they were like really pumping in these research reports I was reading about. And it really
These are the Western
depends.
flower thrips.
Yeah, and so like to answer the question, um, if they have a really suitable host, like cucumber is super suitable as a food source, whereas like peppers are a lot less suitable, so they are less fecund, so they make less eggs, less they live less long. It's probably sort of a accrual of a bunch of things like maybe phytotoxins and other things that make the plant just not a very suitable host, but they can still feed and reproduce on
A lot of
cucumbers and
produce capsaicin, which can actually act as a pest control agent when extracted. So I would imagine that would be one of those phytotoxins that would resist a pest.
absolutely, and like solanine. I'm sensitive to solanine in solanaceous crops, so your potatoes, your tomatoes, your peppers, that sort of a thing. I'm sensitive to it personally, but so are some pests as well.
So
And
you
so
said
to
it's
answer the question, but
what
to
is
answer the question,
solanine?
solanine, it's a phytotoxin that solanaceous plants produce. It's in a lot of different fruits and stuff, and it's the green. So when potatoes get green, that's solanine.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
So it's like the
and
night.
so
Is it the nightshade deal?
it's a nightshade kind of thing. And
Yeah.
there are other compounds as well.
Okay.
But thrips can live from anywhere from like a couple of weeks to like several months. It just kind of depends on what their environment allows for them and what they can genetically. But like their life cycle will be a lot shorter, but you'll get more of them in like hotter temperatures, and they'll last a lot longer in cooler temperatures because their life cycle kind of slows, if that makes sense.
And here we are again to round it all up. Doesn't matter how healthy your plants are. Doesn't matter what the temperature is. You can get thrips.
You can definitely get thrips. Oh man, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're super good at it too. They've definitely developed some really interesting adaptations. I like to talk about how onion thrips have. There's a population that's asexually reproducing and sexually reproducing, and so the sexual guys will have really interesting traits that they got through sexual recombination, and they'll transfer that to the asexual ones, and then they just clone it, you know? So you get the best of both worlds with them. Um,
Jay
question from,
Salas asks,
oh,
how
okay.
do you get rid of russet mites, or are they there forever?
There's plenty of ways. There are compounds. I like to use micronized sulfur, but not in flour, with cannabis in particular. In other crops, people use some really noxious compounds that I wouldn't recommend typically, pretty much ever. And there's also predatory biocontrol agents like Amblysia swirsky, Neosteus cucumeris. Um, I've heard some people say that they've had work with, is it Amblysius phallacis now? Or
Phallacis,
Neocelia?
yeah. I've
Yeah,
heard
but
that
I forget what
phallacis
the
does well
gene.
on broads and russets. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I have a video that talks about or russet mite broadly, russet mite control with biocontrol agents and the research that's gone into evaluating that for a lot of the commercially available um, phytoceid mites or the predatory mites that most people think of.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question here by UW Harry Gundogs says, Do you plant trap plants and plants that naturally repel aphids around your crops? I do encourage people to use banker plants, not always trap plants, but banker plants that will attract like hoverflies and predatory and parasitic wasps and other sorts of things like that.
I would say that
Um,
trap plants work well if you have a 20-acre apple farm and you can't necessarily apply the same sort of biological control agents. But when you're
mhm.
working with a let's say like a highly lucrative crop on a small scale, trap plants aren't a good option because you may just be bringing in the bug you are trying to trap.
Yeah, and that's the same for moth traps as well, I would say, just to sort of piggyback on that. A lot of moth traps are good, but they also are a double-edged sword because literally part of what makes them effective is that they attract them. So you might attract more than you kill
It's
at
like the
night
wasp.
when they're flying.
It's like the wasp traps that people hang outside. You know those yellow tubes.
Hmm.
You put like meat or like this like chemical scent on a cotton ball to attract wasps. But
Sure.
you don't. I guess the idea is you don't want to just go hanging that in an area where there aren't wasps. You want to put it
Yeah,
somewhere where there are already wasps.
right. Definitely. To like not hoist yourself by your own petard, right? But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, um, so with moths, I wouldn't use life trap. I would use pheromone disruptors or something like that. Something that like either confuses the moth so that like basically the males and females don't get to mate because there's just so much of the chemical around that it confuses them, or something that attracts all the males to one spot and so they die. And so that way the reproductive interference is a really good way to do that, but not as a trap anyways.
Yeah.
Um, so this question is by SteshGod415. They don't, or no, this is not a question, but thank you for commenting, Sesh Dog. Let's see here. You have another question already in the
Um,
chat?
sulfur burning. The Cedary Inc. said sulfur burning question mark. I presume. Okay, so sulfur burning it should be a thing of the past, in my opinion. This isn't something that you
In most
should be
places,
doing.
it's quite illegal.
It's quite illegal. Let's
Super illegal. So sulfur dioxide, which is what you get when you burn sulfur, is very, very bad for your lungs and all of your mucosal membranes, so your eyes, your nose, your mouth.
Let me tell you a
Just
story about one time I forgot my cell phone in the grow room in 2014 while the sulfur burn was going on.
mm,
And I decided I was going to run through there real quick, grab the phone, and run out. But I couldn't find the
uh-huh.
door on the way out because I got like, so I was so cloudy, coughing my eyes out, and like finally got to the door and like rolled my way out and like left the door open and sulfur just poured into the rest of the warehouse. I mean, this stuff is
Oh no,
dangerous, dude. It's not something you want to be using. That said,
it's very, very bad.
sulfur sprays can be highly beneficial. I don't use
This
sulfur in
God
my garden, but
415 says, but micronized sulfur is different. It is different. You're not, very importantly, you're not burning it. You're not puralizing it. You're not creating sulfur dioxide. So sulfur by itself, or elemental sulfur, or however it's used in micronized sulfur, it volatilizes. That's true. And in that way, it's not great as well. You don't want to inhale sulfur. Sulfur is bad to inhale for the vast majority of animals. It's deleterious. Our physiology, whether you're an insect or a mammal, is typically pretty bad. But we've evolved around sulfur for a long time. Animals have, and so we can get it. Like humans can get it on their skin. This is not an advocacy for you to just like do this or anything, but like sulfur contact on our epidermis is way different than like inhalation, if that makes sense. And a lot of things are like that. Like you can get venom, but some venoms you can get on your skin and they don't affect you at all. But if they get into your skin or under your skin or into your circulatory system, they can great havoc.
Poison
Poison,
oak
a
is
lot of
this.
poison.
Poison oak is the same way. If I get poison oak, I'm the idiot because I scratched it. If you don't scratch poison oak, it doesn't spread.
Hmm. And another thing, if you burn poison oak, people can inhale the smoke, and that can really burn your insides. And I know people for whom this has happened. They've had huge allergic responses to it.
Hmm.
Um,
Hemlock
so
as
like,
well. Hemlock is
what?
very dangerous.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. So a lot of things are way worse when you ingest them or inhale them, or less worse when you ingest them or inhale them versus if you get them on your skin. So it really just depends. It's hard to say broadly.
Yeah.
Everything's a little different.
Yeah.
Um, Another question here by okay, work with me here. Sesh God again. Does sulfur in soil help with terpene production, or what
Limiting
is the
reagent.
okay,
Sulfur
terpenes?
sulfur does do wonders for terpene production in flower, as does calcium, but none of this stuff happens without each other. So balanced soil makes terpenes, not just sulfur.
Definitely. I honestly don't understand and maybe nobody totally understands all of the sort of physiological processes that biosynthesize terpenes in cannabis, particularly in cannabinoids too. I know that we understand there's like olivetolic acid that that goes on to be produce like certain cannabinoids, and I think also certain terpenes too. So there's like obviously there's a genetic component. There are synthase families that create the proteins that create the compounds that then become the other compounds in this sort of like chain of events.
And
Um,
sulfur works, to my understanding, sulfur works in that same sort of chain of events. You know, I just did a really cool talk with Sustainable Plant Solutions, Eric Sola and John Nelson. And these two are really knowledgeable guys about soil biology. And I think we touched on this. You guys should go check it out, though, on Future Cannabis Projects YouTube
yes.
channel, which Matthew and I also have done some work with recently and plan to probably continue to do some work with. And we are planning one together, but that's going to be an epic blowout. And we don't want to even talk about that yet.
Oh well, all right then. But no, that's cool. So
I'm excited.
Ririak is how I'm gonna pronounce your name. Any resources you guys recommend for beginner newbie horticulturalists? Well, there's my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, on YouTube, which is my
Start there.
channel on YouTube called
It,
Zenthanol.
de-
No, um,
it depends on you, the desired level of understanding. You can
super.
understand that soil and light and water make plant, but you know there's levels to this stuff. So Matt's content is complex, not necessarily a great starting point, but there is some beginner stuff on his channel, so check it out.
Mm-hmm.
check
And it's
out
mostly IPM stuff, but
yeah
yeah, there's other people for sure, and
check
books and
out
things.
like some old school references that I grew up on, was like Jorge Cervantes and Ed Rosenthal, and these guys just have sort of this generalized experience of growing, you know, in the illegal market as it is transitioned into the legal space. And there's a lot of resources out there for beginner horticulturists. I would say so Greg Green is another author that you should look into. Linda Chalker Scott, Elaine Ingham. These are all good people to start reading on and about.
Yeah, and like I mean, there are tons of resources for people. And sometimes they're more academic and empirical, but like you could totally go to a website that's run and operated by like if you're in the United States of America, and even if you're not, you can check out various agricultural extension agencies. They sometimes have master gardener programs that might be in your area, and those places can be chock full of people who want nothing to do except talk about how they cultivate plants. And I really recommend, like, I'm part of, well, I guess I'm not officially part of, actually, now that I think about it, but I've talked with and have a close association with the California Rare Fruit Growers Association. And there's a ton of knowledge and wealth with growing plants in general, but if you're talking about cannabis in particular, there are certainly a lot of grow books and that sort of thing, but I don't commit those to memory typically, unfortunately. I don't have those, but since like Aaron knows a little bit more on that topic.
It's more of an obsessed lifestyle. It's just in my brain whether I like it or not. I know all these names. I don't know anything else. I just know cannabis. So, but yeah, I can recommend lots of good books, including, which I wanted to do before we get off. If anybody wants to get Matt's book, can we DM you and pay you via PayPal, or how can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically what I do is I'll email it to you through my email address, and you can pay me on PayPal. PayPal is the preferred method. I do have a Venmo though as well, but yeah, PayPal is best. And yeah, it's a little over 70 pages of information on various pests. Some of the information is very bleeding edge. Like, for example, I'll interact with people where this is the first example I could even find that this pest is on this plant, ever. So, I don't have those corroborations with like entomologists necessarily and that sort of a thing.
Right.
But like I've worked with people from South Africa, for example, and I remember coming across what are called giant mealybugs, giant scale insects, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget
Same
the
thing,
family
right?
name. Yeah, well, mealybugs are a soft scale, and so they
Oh,
were finding those all over their cannabis plants, and over there they're a huge problem, but they're not as big of a problem in like North America. Um, and I'd never seen them on cannabis before, so that kind of stuff you'll find in the treatise in that book, and I really appreciate the support. I probably should talk about it a lot more, but I'm allergic sometimes to like with clickbait as well. I just have like a philosophical, like, if I can do it in a way that doesn't make me feel like I don't know, misrepresenting anything, which I guess I don't suppose I am just by talking about it, but I don't know. It's my failing.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all part of your approach, and if you support this approach like I do, then this book is gonna be for you. And I'm not a fucking salesman, dude. Excuse my language. I'm not a salesman, but this is like these are tools. Like, if you want to consider yourself a skilled horticulturalist, you should have these tools in your belt. And that, I hope that answers the question long-windedly.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the support. And I've seen in the comments several people who've said that they really want to support me and support the book. And also, in addition to that, um, if you want, I also like to record the people in the acknowledgments in the beginning. If you want, your name goes there too as like a supporter. So some people are anonymous or some people choose not to, and that's totally respectable in my opinion. But for those who do want to sort of be immortalized in the book, you also have that as well. So for those who
So
are
is
interested
that
in
when
that
you
sort of
purchase
thing.
the book, you have that option?
That's right.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool, man. That's very different. I haven't heard that, and that's really involved. And that's your whole thing, man. Is you're right here with us. I feel like no matter what problem I've had, you've been there, dude. Like, even if it takes you a little while to respond, and maybe I'm grateful because maybe you talk to me more than you talk to some people, but man, you've been there the whole way, and you can really get stuff done just by talking to you. And that's why I love doing these chats with you. And I see that we're approaching well over 15 minutes, but
Well over 15. Yeah.
that's it though,
But
man.
they're good
We love talking
questions.
about this stuff. So here we are at 45 minutes.
Yeah, they're good questions though, so they deserve the time. And yeah, I appreciate that, Cannabis Gardens. I see that those comments of support. Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying, Aaron. It's what I do. When a lot of times when I do pretty much all this might not be a good thing to say, but I do pretty much always respond to direct messages. I don't always do them at the moment because I am very busy, especially lately. But I almost always have some sort of downtime where I can at least look at a problem and give some sort of a basic response, especially IDs and that sort of a thing. And that's why I make all the free content on YouTube that I do, because ultimately, and I've said this before, I think that if your business strategy is not better than a Google search, it's a bad business strategy. And I've had
And what
people.
and how easy is it to just drop this guy $15 and have him review some, and this is just, you take donations. Like,
I
I would
do.
drop you like 10 or $15 every time I like had a question. When we first met, I would just be like, okay, I have a question. Let me get the nerve to ask Matt. And then I would, and then it was a simple interaction. I didn't have to have you out to my garden. You're there
No.
for us.
Yeah, and I want to be there for people as a resource. I think that especially this sort of like arcane erudite information that's sort of, like it's kind of locked away both financially because a lot of these research reports are expensive as hell,
Mm-hmm.
or because it's kind of locked away in the way that it's sort of displayed. And I think being able to break that down and make it easily digestible for people is really important. And I think that one of the reasons I talk about evolution and physiology and that kind of thing so much is because when you understand those things fundamentally, even in a simplified way, you can maybe not be as affected by maybe charlatans who are trying to take advantage of your ignorance or something like this.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You know,
This
like
is
if
this is
somebody tells you
education
that,
for this is education for education's sake, right?
yeah, definitely, definitely. And I don't cover everything, but IPM kind of is like covering most things. Like everything kind of
Dude,
affects it.
everything is a part of IPM. The plant nutrition is a part of
It
IPM,
does
as
feel
we've
that way,
covered
right?
in depth
Yeah,
today. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So do we have any other questions? Nope, just comments of endearment, which are
We
great.
appreciate that, definitely.
Yeah. So, I
Well,
mean,
sorry for
do you
pausing. My,
wanna? I mean, I'm sure you're.
my phone
Oh
gave me
no,
a
you're.
10% warning. Sorry for pausing.
Oh, it's fine. So I'm willing to answer more questions. I could just run out the timer. Um,
Yeah.
American One
I,
says
I'm down to
sinking.
hang out for it because it's like if my phone dies, I guess you'll know what happened. But
Right? How can we assist you? Would you want pics of bugs on cannabis or just stay out of the way for you? Anything at all? I appreciate it. Honestly, I like the engagement. I do get overwhelmed sometimes, but that's not like a criticism. It's kind of just how I have a bad I have a bad work life balance because I'm very passionate about my work. But that's on me. That's not on you guys. If somebody needs help, I try to help them out, right? And donations help. That's what the word tip means, right? Back in the old days, it was like an initialism or an acronym or whatever um for like I think the P and the S was like punctual service,
yeah, it was if you
or
did a
something
job
like
well
that.
done. That's what a tip is for. So
Right.
if
Yeah. Well,
you
it's like for prompt service, I should say, I think. So
okay,
like, that kind of a thing. In certain cultures anyways, and I think in Europe and America, like that's where the tipping culture kind of came about in a lot of ways. And so anyways, but I help plenty of people who don't donate to, and that's just how I am.
yep,
And some people, and I'm not saying that I'm better than other people who are super busy or whatever, but like, it does help a lot. And I do put that money towards, I have a Patreon actually, if you want to be a constant supporter, but it's hard to maintain a Patreon account even right now because I do make content on my YouTube channel and all that, but having that balance is sort of difficult sometimes.
yeah, and I don't think I didn't know you had a Patreon. All I know is what's on your bio where it says PayPal donations.
I should
Uh,
probably be more good about that. That's
Yeah, well,
that's a big part of it. It's just like talking about it all. I don't like
yeah.
to talk about it all the time. I want to talk about what I want to talk about. I don't
I
want to
will
talk
shake
about
it out of you. I will shake it out of you.
good. You should do that because that's probably how it's going to happen. Is that
Yeah.
people are gonna like Jack Greenstock, right? He's been very supportive and nice, and him and the rest of the cheap home grow people will constantly talk about that, and I appreciate it. I guess we have another question. What do you guys think of? Oh, this is by Man U222. What do you guys think of growing hemp in the tropics? Strong heat, humidity resisting species, or I guess probably means like cultivars, that sort of a thing. Good question. I will just start off by saying that in my Global Integrated Pest Management Review series on YouTube, I do talk about pest-host relationships and cannabis evolution. And the part one is the one that talks about evolution and where the plants come from, as much as we know. And so cannabis, about 18 or 19 million years ago, split off from hops, or hops and, or what I should say is that hops and cannabis split off. They diverged,
From each
right,
other. Yeah. Yeah.
from each other. And um, so cannabis plants are a Eurasian plant, and they've expanded all over Eurasia, but I did see a research report that looked over these haplogroups, which is just a fancy way of saying like genetically related population. And the basal haplogroup, so the one that gave rise to these other two, which are stratified longitudinally, so like on the globe. So like one of like these, the first one, the basal one, is like very close to like the equator, or much
Mm.
more close. It's kind of like in that sort of like southern China, southeast China area, probably also India, although they didn't go that far to like check it out. There are probably populations there too. Um, and then they kind of go up in the longitude, but like the interesting thing to me is that there's definitely plants that are sort of more adapted to that sort of
Mm-hmm.
high heat, high humidity stuff. And I mean, honestly, I don't really have a good resource for especially hemp. I often try to like track down, like I've talked to people who have hemp sort of genetics, and I ask like, oh, what's the pedigree for these hemp plants? Like, where do they come from? And I've been able to find some information, but it's really pretty cryptic. And I'm really waiting for a research report that's like, here we did like a broad spectrum phylogenetic look at like 150 hemp cultivars, and we found that like most of them, in my video, I do have some hemp cultivars that are and even drug type cannabis that's associated with the northern haplogroup that's at the very top, which is interesting. But like I'm waiting for that research report that'll show like this one's related to this population, or most of these related to like all these populations, across the earth. Some
So
natural
the
populations might not exist anymore, though.
so it may be kind of tough to come across a variety that will I almost said strain. Woo! A variety that will that will be resistant to these kinds of things. And this is where finding a good breeder who gathers genetics from the latitude that you call home, and then selecting from those genetics yourself. So doing a phenotype selection where you kind of find out, run some seeds in the middle of in the most humid time of year and find out what is resistant and run those genetics. That would be my
Mhm.
response.
And I would also say that for a lot of plants, and by the way, I appreciate the comment, Chitterbob13, for noticing Aaron. Aaron is definitely going to a bunch of other places in the space, and I really appreciate that. I'm glad that I'm seeing that facilitation. It's one of the reasons I'm talking to you right now. I think I like to facilitate people as much as possible in good
You
content.
started it. You started it. You, as they say
Yeah.
back in the day, you put me on game, man. So, I appreciate it.
I love doing that when I can. I like to support people who I think are really making a good difference, and using my platform in that way. You know, But
Thank you, Cheddar Bob. I appreciate it, and
a
I
lot
look
of
forward
a lot
to
of
bringing you guys more scientific content.
me too. But to answer the question, a lot of plants do they're able to grow. They're able to grow in environments that they're not typically adapted to by using microbes and having microbial interactions. And sometimes this is a very extreme thing, but it's a very common trait, not trait, but sort of like tendency across a lot of different plants is that if they do live in kind of a super hot environment or something that's a little bit more extreme, they oftentimes have like a microbial symbiont or something that allows them that ability in nature. So it might be that there may be some sort of interaction with microbes where they will be more tolerant. That sort of research is still kind of underway too. A lot of those microbes might be kind of generalistic and might also work with other crop plants, or they might be more specialized to cannabis. But regardless, I think that we might find that you could maybe help adapt a plant that's typically not related to related to the tropical area with the right microbial inoculation potentially. And I think I've lost Aaron, unfortunately. Yeah. Or maybe our live is already gone. Yep, yep, that's what happened. So I'll wait for him a little bit. If anyone has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But yeah, I'm happy that people appreciate my work. Oh, he probably just got a text. You're right, Ohio higher education. Um, oh no, he's gone now, right? Yeah. So, um, anyways, we're pretty close to the end though, so I'm just gonna sign off here. If you just came in and you're curious about what we were talking about, the last live stream is on my IGTV, um, and it talked about why healthy plants get pests and kind of other things related to plant physiology and integrated pest management. And this hour was basically talking about questions or taking questions that are related to that topic. And I have videos on my YouTube channel that kind of go about this too. And so, yeah, if you're interested, also if you want to see more of me and my talking, Cheap Home Grow podcast also has me every Sunday around 4 o'clock p.m. PST, Pacific Standard Time. So yeah, check us out. It's usually about a 2 hour, I want to say sometimes 2.5 hour podcast. And there's a ton of really cool people. The American one with the Keens is one of them, in fact. Aaron the Grower is also on the Cheap Home Grow podcast sometimes. Hota Herb, Jack Greenstock, Dr. MJ Coco, a lot of people who I very much respect in the industry, and I'm very happy Spartan Grown, particularly as well. Um, it's just really cool to like kind of get to talk with everyone and sort of just hang out and speak about cannabis related stuff. So if you're interested in that, for people who are asking the question for my book, my treatise, my book about cannabis pests is called specifically, let me just get it out here for you. It's called Cannabis Pests and Their Management, and I'm on version 2.1. So I kind of come out with new versions kind of every quarter or every year, depending on, I have 30 seconds remaining. So if you're interested in that, you can send me a direct message, and I will send it to you through email. I appreciate donations through PayPal, especially, but also Venmo. And I hope that the 70 plus pages are useful for those who want it. So, yeah. Oh, Gary Vee would be proud of my content? Well, that's definitely a compliment.